to our hemp production webinar series. This is put on by a team of people, Heather, Catherine, Stephanie from the agency, and our guest today is Rose Wilson, who is a market development and business specialist, business planning specialist. We have a couple sponsors. We have Sarah, and also the Northeast Extension Risk Management Education, because the emphasis of a lot of these webinars have been on risk. Last week, Rose talked about, is there a market for hemp, researching the market? And if any of you are tuning in today and missed that, that is available as a recording, so you can look at that link. Today, the talk will be about assessing the market. How are hemp products different? So really learning, how do you get the information you need to test whether your product works? So this webinar will be for about an hour. Rose will be showing a PowerPoint, and then there's an opportunity to ask questions in the chat. So without further ado, I'll get over to Rose's screen. Hello, Rose. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. So yes, I'm Rose Wilson, and I'm an independent business planner, and I have a particular expertise on the market research side, market development. I'm always trying to make sure that people link their business plans with their markets and vice versa, because you can spend a lot of money on marketing, but if it's not tying into your business goals, you could be spending a lot of money without actually achieving what you want for the business itself, and that's not fun. So what I wanted to do today was walk us through a bit of a recap of what we talked about last week, which is my business, who do I want to be marketing to, and what do I want to be marketing? And then today talking about, is this idea going to be feasible for you? So we want to reiterate the bigger picture of why are we doing hemp? We want to restate who we intend to market it to and what it is that we intend to make. And then we want to talk about how to actually see if that's going to be feasible for our farm and our operation. So we're going to look at, is the product and market channel going to be feasible, and where to kind of look for answers, because that's one of the biggest questions I get from folks as well. Well, I don't know where to start. So we'll walk through that. And then the most important thing, once you've gathered information, is to actually use that information to inform your business planning. So what do you do with the information you've gathered? We'll learn how to analyze those results. So to restate the bigger picture, one of the things that we really wanted to focus on last week was just understanding, why are you interested in getting into hemp? So what are the goals that you have for your farm? Why are you farming? What are your personal goals, and what are your professional goals? And how is your farm going to help you achieve those? And then how is growing hemp or making hemp value-added products going to support those goals? You need to start with some assumptions, because the whole point of the business planning process is to test out these initial assumptions that you have, so that we can see if these assumptions actually hold. And if they hold, is the business going to be able to achieve what you're seeking in order to support your goals? So then the next step is the second thing that we wanted to reiterate was, once you did your market research from last week, understanding what products you wanted to make and what markets you would be best suited to supporting. And that's really important, because when you're self-employed, you can actually become very successful doing what you're doing. And ultimately, we want you to be doing something that you enjoy doing and working, servicing markets that you enjoy interacting with. So we really want to understand, does the business have the assets and infrastructure needed to make what you're thinking of making? And then based on your personality and interaction, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, whether you like interacting and engaging with lots of people or fewer people, whether you would be better served trying to focus on wholesale markets and price efficiency, or whether you want to remain small scale and service a lot of farmers markets and engage with a lot of one-on-one conversations. So again, that's found in our workshop from last week. But once you've identified what your product and your market is, then our next question is testing out whether that market and that product is actually going to achieve the goals we have for hemp and its contributions to our farm. So the first thing you want to understand is, for you getting into this game with a lot of other competition, what are you bringing to market? Oftentimes when we're working with folks who want to get placement in a retail store, for example, the retailers nowadays tell us we have everything we need. There's technically not a product that isn't available now to consumers. And so the question is, what are you bringing that's new, or how are you better than what's already available? Because otherwise there's really not much of an opportunity to compete in the marketplace. You really need to find out what either makes you a new trend or hits a need that hasn't yet been met, or that you can service a need better than the existing offerings out there. And then once you've identified what you think differentiates you, then you have to say, okay, now who is going to benefit from those points of differentiation? Who do my reasons for being and reasons for creating this product resonate with? So we've identified, based on your personalities and your business assets, who we think your target is. And then within that, based on what you find is your unique selling proposition, who are the customers that would resonate with your unique selling proposition? One of the examples I'll give for a unique selling proposition is folks will say, well, I'm a small scale producer on a family farm in Vermont. Well, if there's 10 other small scale producers on a family farm in Vermont, how does that benefit the consumer who is looking at CBD for its health properties? So trying to find out, why is that person seeking out those products? And then how can your story or the benefits of your CBD help that person? And that's where your unique selling proposition might actually be that by being a small scale family farm in Vermont, you're able to better pay attention to your crops and harvest a higher CBD content strain that provides better therapeutic benefits to the customer. And so the key there being that what makes you unique is that you're able to provide a better product to the customer. And that's the story that needs to be told. So thinking about what makes you special and how that's going to resonate to the customer. The customer might not really care that you're from Vermont and that you're on a family farm, but if that actually makes your product more effective to them, that's really going to resonate. And so that needs to come through. So once you find out what is going to resonate with your customer, then you actually need to start to quantify your market, because the biggest and most important thing that we need to know is, how many things do you intend to sell? And then is there a sufficient market to buy the volume that you're hoping to produce? So we want to research how many of those potential customers are out there. And then once we know how many of them are out there, we kind of really want to get a sense of, what are they going to pay? How frequently are they going to buy? And what period of time is that purchasing taking place over, so that we can tie that back to the business plan and make sure that the amount of market supports the amount that you're planning to produce and cover the cost of producing it. Just checking chat to make sure we don't have any questions. If there are folks watching who do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll seek to address them as we scoot along. So I made a chart. I tend to try to organize things by chart to help people have a visual understanding of their data sets. And really when I'm working with folks, I try to make you break it down into specifics. So if you have wholesale contracts, or if you are seeking wholesale contracts, or if you're thinking to sell to retailers, or if you're trying to even just get an understanding of your individual consumer customer base, start testing your market to find out from each customer, actually engaging with the customer to ask them, if we had this available, how much would you buy, how frequently, and at what price point? And that's important because the price point might impact how much they buy and how frequently. They might consider it, ooh, that's expensive, I'll limit it to special occasions. Or they might be saying, oh, that's an everyday price, I can support that and use this on a regular basis. So you really want to get a sense of how is the pricing that you're considering impacting their frequency purchasing. And then what you do is you could list, okay, this is how much they're planning to purchase. Customer A is going to buy 1 cream a week, and they're going to buy that cream at $20 for a 4-ounce jar. And so then you can quantify how much money customer A is going to generate to your sales, and same with customer B, and same with customer D, and so on. And what you're really trying to do is you're trying to build up a sense of how many folks are out there, and once you total their buying habits, will that volume support your operating expenses once you've identified your cost of production? Now, when you're dealing with retailers or wholesale accounts, or you're planning to supply other manufacturers, so if you're trying to do bulk hemp and you're trying to sell to other manufacturers who are going to transform your hemp into value-added products themselves, then you might only have a few of these big customers. And then if you're trying to do individual consumers, what you might do is you might have categories of consumers based on some market research that you do that identifies this certain type of customer, and there's this many of them will have these purchasing habits, so that you can have customer A as a customer type and customer B as a customer type. Or, for example, if you're doing different farmers markets, and you can be surveying your customers at each farmers market and saying, okay, farmers market A is likely to generate this much frequency and purchases. Farmers market B is likely to be generating. So you can change up how you structure your charts, but the key is to really try to nail down as best you can the actual specifics of how much you expect your customers to be buying, and how frequently and at what price point, because that enables you to then be proactive in assessing if your business plan is working once you put it into motion. So again, business planning is all about assumptions, testing those assumptions, and then following through and monitoring if those assumptions are actually transpiring. And if they're not, then it gives you the opportunity to proactively figure out what you might do differently to try to get the business plan on track. Or if you're meeting or exceeding what you've anticipated, then it just gives you a chance to really say, hey, things are going great, let's keep trucking along. So then the question, and this is a slide from last week that I just wanted to reinsert here. How do you find people to talk to? It's really important to try as best possible to use what I call first party research to get a sense of your customers and their buying habits. And that is because as much as there's a lot of online data or industry data saying the trends for hemp are this and that, there's going to be $1 billion industry, those are gross trends, but they're not trends specific to your business with where you're particularly located and the actual individuals you're particularly going to be trying to interact with. And so large trends can support a business plan, but they won't ensure that you're going to be successful and that you have actual benchmarks that you can say, is my business plan holding true according to the specifics of my assumptions on who's going to be buying my product and how frequently and at what price point. So you really do want to engage in putting your customers on the spot and asking them those questions. And the reason for that is because if people tell you no, it's better to have that answer now while you're still in a planning mode than to find out once you've spent a lot of money and time investing in this idea. And so as much as the fear of no can inhibit you from wanting to find out, and it's nicer to just say, oh, this market is growing, I'm just going to assume that I've got a product and people will want it, it's actually really going to benefit you in the long run to confirm with the actual people you're intending to be your consumers, your purchasers, whether they would in fact buy your product. And or if they say, well, maybe no, your price is too high, or well, I'd buy it if it had this in it. Those are the type of things that if you knew now, you could tweak your plan before you go into implementation to ensure you're more likely to have success. So the first thing to do is really plan for the fact that you're going to be interacting with your prospective buyers, and that you can do it in a really nice diplomatic way. They're used to getting customer research calls because everybody else has a business plan and everybody else is doing the same thing. Everybody needs to know who's going to be buying my product, how frequently, and in what quantity and at what price point. So if we're planning to speak with wholesalers or retailers, you really do want to be making up a list of who you think the retailers who would be interested in your product are. You also want to be focused on what is your geographic plan? Are you planning to be nationwide? Especially with hemp, are you limited to specific geographies based on some of the regulations? So understanding who can be your customer, and then also within that, who is most likely to be your customer, and then beginning to do your outreach, your direct outreach. For your consumer outreach, if it's hard for you to engage one-on-one with individuals, sometimes I often recommend just really relying on what the retailers are telling you. Retailers are great because they actually engage so much with consumers that they can tell you the trends of what's happening. If you have a sense of what people are buying and what's driving that purchasing and what the price points are in the store, you can get a really good sense from the retailers about potential volume and price points. And then the question is based on where you're intending to sell the product. If it's going to be at a farmer's market or your farm stand, then the question is, well, how much traffic are you actually getting? Because that's going to be different than what's at the retail location. So understanding price points and purchasing habits from the retailers can be very helpful, as well as product specifications. But then again, where you're planning to sell the product will really impact likely the number of consumers that you might have if you're doing direct to consumer budgeting. So with the consumers, there's also some data sets that you can purchase. And there's some really interesting consumer surveys that can be done online where you're actually paying for consumers to participate in surveys, and they will provide information on things such as price points. If you've got branding samples already, like what packaging layout looks better, what's more intriguing to them, what product features or benefits are more of interest to them. That can be really useful if you're trying to reach a consumer base that's beyond who you can communicate with interactively. For example, if you're trying to reach consumers in a regional geography and it's going to be harder for you to talk to retailers in those regions. So if you're limited on budget, really trying to engage with the retailers and do some focus groups and direct one-on-one communication with individuals. If you have a bit of an extra budget, some of these paid surveys and SPINS data, Mintel data that you can buy might then further support your assessment of what you think might happen in your marketplace. The SPINS and the Mintel data, those are actually data sets that track at the retail level. So they're based on information from stores that track how much products are being sold, what brands, which brands are moving faster than other brands, what are the price points. So it's useful information, but again, it won't necessarily indicate what would happen if your brand was there. It's just historical, anecdotal data of what's happening in the marketplace now. The consumer surveys, if you're actually buying the consumer survey data sets, those are actually people that are engaging in particularly a brand in your product. And so if you're, again, these are some actual specific ways to get at that information. The Census Bureau will have a lot of supportive information on if you've identified the type of consumer that you're going for. They'll have demographic information available. If you're looking for lists of potential retailers, for example, the Vermont Grocers Association and the Specialty Food Retailers Association, all of those members are going to be great places to start. If you're looking for wholesale buyers, then researching industry associations within the hemp industry, you might have to do some further research broadly across the US to find out, okay, well, yeah, who is manufacturing things with hemp fiber now, for example. And the list might be pretty thin. It's not like there's going to be necessarily a lot of people, a lot of businesses using hemp fiber at the moment. So that's why it's really important to understand who are those potential buyers and begin engaging with them directly. There might be buyers for hemp fiber, but if they're not near you or it's not economical to ship to, again, they might not be a buyer and we have to eliminate them from your list. So ultimately, your feasibility testing is to help you understand if there are enough customers who will purchase in enough frequency and volume at a price point that supports your cost of production, your profitability, and your desired scale of operation. That's important. Let's talk about those last three things. So in addition to doing the market research to understand on the market side what your market potential is, you also really need to understand on the back side of the operation, do you have the capacity to produce this? And what is the scale of operation that you're seeking to be at? Partly because if you're going into a wholesale environment, or if you're trying to reach regional markets, then you might find that you're going to start facing price pressure, especially from some of the larger brands. So hemp is becoming a market in which there's large operators, and those large operators can operate very efficiently. And so all of a sudden that's putting price pressure. And unless you have a very unique selling proposition as to why your product might cost so much more than some of your competition, you might have to start seeing whether you can actually bring your price down. And so oftentimes what happens is if you need to bring your price down, then you need to increase your scale because the smaller margin necessitates more volume. So we want to know what's the size and scale of your operation that you want to be at. And if you don't have to grow bigger, then growing bigger is just optional. But if you need to grow bigger, do you have the capacity to do that? And do you have the desire to do that? Those are really important things to think about. So the key ultimately is to understand where do you want your business to be, and then seeing if there's sufficient market to support the size of your business as it is now, or as you want it to be. And then the next question is, if not, what variables could change? And that's where business planning becomes that iterative process of, if the cost of production as you've identified it and the scale of the operation the market that you've identified does not support the cost that you've got now, then what could change? Could you increase your pricing? If you increased your pricing, how would that impact the frequency of purchasing and the volume of purchasing? How would that impact gross sales? And how would the gross sales then either better or worse support the cost of production as you have it? Ultimately, if your cost of production was already exceeding what your gross sales were, you're looking to find ways to change the sales variables such that they can support your cost of production. Alternatively, can your cost of production change? And that's where it gets really tricky if you have mission-driven values for your farm and you're identifying that your cost of production is too high. Trying to grow or produce efficiently and having to assess whether you have mission-driven variables of your business that need to be cut is a difficult thing. And that's where you really want to be able to assess, can you have your unique selling proposition support the mission-driven increase in expense, which creates your product pricing premium? Or are there ways that you can continue to adhere to your mission while also being a bit more efficient in your operating mechanisms? And again, that's just one of those things that you kind of need to look at. It's ideally, you're going to find that this is what I want to do, and here's the market, and the market supports what I want to do. But if not, are there variables that could change such that in the end of the day, you have a plan that does appear that the market will support the production and logistics, and you're still going to achieve the goals that you have. And so the question then becomes, ideally, you'll have gone through all of those iterations, and you will then go into a point where the plan looks feasible. If the plan looks feasible, then what do you need to do? Then the marketing actually goes from being market research to market implementation. Now, the one benefit, a benefit to doing your market research, one of the key benefits to doing the market research is everything with respect to marketing and sales is relationship driven. And so even when you're doing your market research, you're actually in the initial sales proposition or sales process with your potential customers. You're engaging with them, you're introducing them to your potential product, you're asking them for their feedback, for their input. And so all of a sudden you've started to create a relationship, and that's really valuable. So what we'll then do is take that and begin to work on the marketing, actually getting the product out the door. I'm going to stop for a minute to just address a couple of chats that popped up. So the first question, Rose, do you think a membership type CSA could work for retail customers given wellness health should be a regular and repeat thing? And if you had a product that you could find, obviously one of the benefits to a membership CSA is that you're instilling sort of a prepaid regular commitment from a buyer. And a prepaid regular commitment from a buyer further supports the business plan because it guarantees that you've got a buyer at a certain frequency and a certain volume. So actually that's one of the reasons why people love CSAs and these buying clubs and memberships is because you can plan where your income is coming from and how much of it is coming from each individual. They're wonderful in that respect. If there's ways that you can identify for your particular product, how you could offer it as a membership or a regular repeat buy, we have, one of the fun things to do is always look at what sort of the larger trends in sales and marketing are. And so often right now, if you buy something online, say PetSmart. So if especially during COVID, when we weren't able to go to the stores and I started buying my pet food online, the first thing that they started doing now was offering me, do you want to make this a repeat purchase? And you just press the box and it'll auto charge my card once a month and send me pet food once a month. If you wanted to even just offer options like that to folks buying your products, certainly if you can find ways to, from the feedback you're getting from your customers, identify what their frequency would be so that you can offer them subscription-based services. Absolutely, if you can do that, that's going to benefit you because it helps you know when and where your money is coming from. And so then the second question is there an example of a Vermont producer having to change their mission-driven principles based on the current market? So I'll give two examples. They are they're meat-produced examples at the moment. So Vermont Smoke and Cure started out wanting to make their value-added products with Vermont grown animals, Vermont raised hogs, and they were not able to compete in the market at the price it would have taken them to source Vermont raised hogs. So while the brand is still called Vermont Smoke and Cure, they actually on their label had to change their label to state that the animals are actually being sourced from Canada. Similarly, Vermont Salumi is a value-added meat producer in the state, and they were originally sourcing their livestock supply from Vermont. And as they've grown regionally, they've had to source their livestock also from abroad because they needed source inputs that cost less because their margins were being driven down. So yes, we have plenty of examples of Vermont producers that have had to or felt that they had to alter some of their potentially originally desired mission and values in order to participate in a larger regional market. Okay, so once we do have a sense that we've got the customers and the business plan looks like it's going to be feasible, then what are we going to do to actually engage those customers? So we want to generate the customers, we want to retain those customers, and we want to get them to buy, ideally in increasing frequently and ideally in increasing volume. But even if we can get them to a stable, fairly regular buying frequency and a known quantity volume for your planning purposes and for the sustainability of the business, that's really helpful. So to generate your customers, the first step, as we said, was already in your customer research when you were starting to do your prospects and understanding what they would potentially buy. Would they potentially buy? Now that you've got your product, the key is to actually reach back out to them and seek product placement. And with product placement, one of the things that you might have done during your customer research is to actually kind of ask, especially if you're going into the reseller or the wholesaler supply chain, is to ask them what sort of marketing support they would need in order to say, yes, they'll bring in your product. Do they need any market displays? Do they need any point of sale material? Are they expecting any sort of pricing incentives, whether it's pricing incentives for them to buy the product in, or whether it's pricing incentives for the consumer to get the consumer to buy the product once it's on the shelf? So you want to hopefully have identified those as well prior to now, because then what we're going to do is we're going to create our marketing matrix. So your marketing matrix is basically helping you identify, of all the different marketing ideas you could do, what do you have a budget for? And then based on your budget, what are the best ideas you could be doing for marketing, or what are going to lead to the highest potential sales outcomes? And this is where people tend to dissociate marketing from their business plan. They're like, oh, marketing, I just have to get online activity. I need to Facebook, I need to get posts, I need to get likes. Actually, your marketing really should be about getting sales. And so ultimately, the first thing you need your marketing to do is support sales-driven income. So getting likes and the Facebook engagement, that's secondary. That's once you have customers and you're trying to retain them, or once you're trying to bring customers into the fold. But the first thing you need to do is get product placement and then get people buying it from where it's located. So most often the best bang for your buck once you just get started is going to be on your product packaging. So how does the product look and feel? And point of sale material, especially if you're not going to be there to engage with the customer. That's one of the best things about farmers markets or having a farm stand and actually being there, is being able to actually directly engage with the customer and explain to them the features and benefits of your product, connect with them, create that relationship. That's where the one-on-one sales with actually engaging with retail accounts and with wholesalers comes into play. You're developing that relationship. So if you are not going to be right there to be able to develop the relationship with somebody exploring your brand or your product, then you need to be providing them that engagement at their point of decision making of taking that product home. That's going to be your first set of priorities of where you want to spend your marketing money. Then you can work on supportive branding and marketing once you've actually got your point of sale and your product placement, your product packaging, your initial customer service aspects completed. Another thing that folks don't really necessarily think about is that customer service is a large part of sales and marketing, and customer service is a large part of what makes businesses successful. And so one of the things that we might want to focus our budget on is actually having somebody that answers the phone or can process orders, can be timely about returning a wholesaler's call or a retailer's request, somebody who can go and do demos, those type of expenses that we might not actually think of, but they're really important, and they're more important than spending money trying to take some time to do Facebook engagement. So the first thing you want to do is identify the list of all of your options of what you could be spending your time on, and then creating a priority of whether that list, whether each item is going to potentially lead to sales, and what it's going to cost to implement, and when it would need to be done by. There's some things that have pretty open-ended deadlines, and then there's other things. For example, if you're going to go to a trade show, or there's the Big E, potentially you're going to have a booth at the Big E. The Big E has a deadline. It has a deadline for when the action is going to take place, and it also has a deadline for reserving your space. So you want to be able to say, what is this marketing opportunity? What potential impact will it have on my sales? What will it cost to implement? And when do I need to have it done by? And you might prioritize things based on those that have good bang for your buck and actually need to happen within a fairly immediate time frame, and then leave the more open-ended ones for when you can get to them. So again, I call it a marketing matrix, because you're basically just looking at trying to prioritize your options based on the best return for you, and do you have the capacity to get them done within the time frame, and do you have the ability to measure their outcomes to determine whether that cost is worth it and then whether you want to repeat it in the future. So basically, you want to identify what you're anticipating spending for your marketing budget, or if you don't know what you're anticipating spending, using your prioritized list to kind of get a sense of what the maximum budget could be, and then maybe setting some limitations on your budget to give you a sense. And most of our Vermont companies can't really compete, but most of the large corporate brands are spending up to 15% of their gross sales on marketing. And especially within the hemp world, that can be a lot of money. And that's where you see really fancy packaging and really targeted ad and consumer campaigns and buying market space. You might not have that capacity. So I don't tend to like to worry about what the industry benchmarks are so much as saying, what can you do and what's going to be most effective for you? But it's always helpful to know what other people are spending so that you can say, oh, okay, no wonder that's happening. So once you've made your list, then you can keep your other options on the table, because again, the goal of having your business plan and your marketing plan is that you can refer back to it to say what worked, what didn't work. If there's things that didn't work, what were the other options that I had that I can swap some things out? So set aside remaining options for future consideration. And then the next key thing to do is to actually implement your plan, because we do a lot of planning and then oftentimes we just get into the hamster wheel of go mode and we don't actually do the items that we thought we were going to do. And so having the plan is a way to keep you accountable. So when we said what things needed to be done by when, we also say who's going to do them so that you can check back and say, did this person sign us up for this farmer's market? Did this person get us registered to attend this event? Did this person call these retailers and schedule introductory visits? Those type of things. Did we engage with our consumers? Did we get the farm stand built? Did we get the plants planted? All of those things are important because you want to be able to assess if the business is on track, great, and if it's not, why not? Where are the hiccups happening? And can you, especially with your marketing, for the cost that you're expending, what are the outcomes that are being realized? Does it feel like it's a good spend? And do we want to repeat it or do we want to change it up? One of the big important things to remember about marketing is that people take a long time to change their buying behaviors, purchasing behaviors, their buying habits. And so oftentimes you'll need to get in front of somebody 5 or 6 times before they even know that you're out there and that you've kind of gotten into their brain pan, and then B, that they've made a decision as to whether they're interested in engaging. And then once they're interested in engaging, it still might take another 5 or 6 times before they actually decide to act upon it. So they might see your product in a store, or they might drive by your farm stand 5 times before all of a sudden they realize you're actually there. And then another 5 times before they actually determine, oh yeah, I've been wanting to stop, I'm going to stop. So do remember that marketing is a long, slow process. And that's why you kind of also want to celebrate small successes along the way. Set mini goals for yourself for each of those action items. You know, be reviewing and celebrating when the action items are done and if they were successful. And then ultimately, each of the little action items will lead to supporting your ability to achieve the bigger goal. So this is that statement, basically review, revise, and implement. Marketing is very iterative. You're always trying to see what worked and what didn't, updating it and honing it in. And ultimately what happens is marketing becomes a really nicely fine-tuned engine rather than scattershot trying all these different ideas. You really want to take the time to do a couple things, do them well, test out if they're working, allow the market to come and respond to you, and then keep going, eliminating things that are not working, especially things that cost money and are not working, replacing them with things that are, or you think might be a new thing to try. And slowly but surely, you'll have a nicely fine-tuned engine that's running. The other thing that's important to do is to just check in with your overall goals for the business. So are the goals for the business still the same? Has anything changed there? How is hemp and the hemp products that you're producing continuing to contribute and support your larger goals, so that you can always be focusing on ensuring that your needs are being met. The biggest thing, again, that you want is for your business to be contributing to your overall success and happiness. So that is what we're looking to do. And I had a couple additional slides to just share with folks. These are slides that I find helpful for the market research pieces, market research and the business planning piece of things. We often get questions on how to set pricing. So I wanted to give you guys some rules of thumb here. I've been tracking pricing basically since I started. I was the business development manager for Harpoon Brewery in the early 2000s. And I've been tracking pricing for the food and beverage industry. And then again, with our local food and especially with hemp, also the health and wellness market. So typically the industry standard for gross margin is 35% for food and beverage categories, 40 to 50 for health and wellness categories. And the question then is, okay, well, what's gross margin? So gross margin is your sales minus your cost of goods sold. And technically, the leftover is what would support your overhead and also provide your profit. And one of the key things to realize is that that 35 to 40 to 50%, if you're going to be using those as numbers to verify your business against, then you have to ensure that you're also tracking your cost of goods the way the industry tracks cost of goods. So cost of goods is really everything that goes into making the product. So in your case, if you're making a hemp-based product, it includes the cost of growing and harvesting the hemp, anything related to producing the hemp. It includes the cost of any value-added production, whether it's labor, electricity, packaging expenses, rent for any facility if you're renting a facility. So all of the aspects of the expenses related to producing the product. It does not include sales and marketing. It does not include shipping expense to get the product to the end user, be it the retailer or the consumer. It doesn't include any overhead, office expenses, non-production labor. But pretty much everything else will fall under cost of goods sold. And so if you wanted to use your cost of goods sold and the gross margin to set your pricing, then what you would want to do is you would want to say, oh, sorry, just need to move people's heads around so I can see the last line. Basically, the desired overhead and profit that you need divided by the number of units that you're anticipated selling. So if you know that in order for your business plan to succeed, you need $100,000 after cost of goods sold to cover your overhead and profit, then you would say $100,000 divided by the number of units that you have identified you could sell or you intend to make, and then multiply that by 100 divided by 35, technically to get to the 65%. And that would tell you what you need for your pricing to be per unit. And then you can use that to see if that's going to fly in the market. So if we, let me just get to an example here. So if we knew that we were trying to get to a 35% gross margin, in this case, the product would need to, if the price to the distributor was $1, the price to the consumer would need to be $2.14 for the retailer to have a 35% margin. What that would then lead to is the producer having $1 left over for their cost of goods sold and their overhead. And technically that would mean that you would need ideally 65 cents to cover your cost of production and 35 cents to cover your overhead and profit. And the question then for you is that sufficient? I have a price waterfall calculator. If folks want it, you could just let me know, and I will get that to you. And then the question sometimes people ask, well, can I increase the gross margin? The issue with increasing the gross margin is whether you have the capacity to. Like if you're a super efficient producer and the market would support a consumer price that's higher than what you need to hit those 65-35 or 60-40, 50-50 splits, then sure. And the other option is actually you could make your price to the consumer then lower than your competitors and sort of undercut the market. And that could potentially increase the volume of items that you're selling. So the question for you is, if you either have a very compelling, unique selling proposition that would result in a higher price, if you're super efficient and you can actually pocket the extra margin, or if you wanted to actually cut your pricing and give the consumers a discount and encourage increased volume. So just be aware that yes, you can play with gross margin, but there's industry standards typically because this is what either the consumers have set as an expectation, or you will really need to have a different selling proposition in order to exceed that. Most of our farms don't actually tend to be more efficient than industry standard in our cost of production. And I think, let me see if there was one other slide. Okay, I'll get you one other slide. This was the slide that I wanted to talk about, just the difference between margin and markup. Margin is oftentimes what's used in the industry. So the retailers and the wholesalers want to know when they're buying an item in, how much of their costs are going towards the item versus their overhead. So they tend to use a margin. And so when you're actually doing your market research and you're trying to understand what a retailer tells you they would pay for a product, you want to also ask them if they're using a margin or a markup, because that's helpful for you to know if you're trying to do some backwards math, what the price to you would be or what the price to the consumer would be, so that then you can understand if they say, well, I'll buy it in from you at $3 and we'll use a 45% markup versus a 30% margin, you'll know what math to use to understand what the consumer price point is going to look at. And when you do your consumer price research, whether that price point is going to fly. So understanding the margin versus markup when you're talking to them, and then once they tell you what percent they're using and whether it's margin or markup, you'll know how that's impacting your numbers. So those are just a couple tidbits on margin and markup. And other than that, I think that is what I wanted to walk through today. Next week, we're going to walk through a business who's actually done it, which is going to be really exciting. We're going to have Zion Growers here with us, and they started out as hemp growers. They went through looking at the CBD market. Then they have now gone into looking at the hemp fiber market, and they're actually launching a hemp processing business to take bulk hemp and direct it into the fiber industry. So that is going to be what is on tap for next week. And what I will do is stop my share. and see if we have any questions.
Thank you, Rose. We have a couple minutes left for questions, but I was just going to make a comment. It's a really good reminder that there's no kind of one magic message for marketing, because sometimes you feel like if you only have the right name for your product or the right tagline, it will fly. But I appreciate you saying being in for the long haul, the idea of having to test the market, check your prices, review, revise this iterative process. You know, it's the long haul. It takes a while to get it right.
It really does.
And then you have to revise it again. Just when it's right, the market changes and you have to do it all over again.
Yeah, exactly. And I often show people slides of Budweiser and just looking at how many times over the Budweiser history they've gone through a can change, or, I mean, the product itself has never changed. The recipe has always been the same, but over time people get bored and so they need a refresh. And refresh isn't bad. It doesn't mean you're failing. It just means you need to find ways to re-engage with your customer, and they use it as a marketing tactic. And again, that becomes one of their budgets for that year is, oh, we're going to spend money on a can refresh, or we're going to introduce a new flavor because people are bored with Budweiser. So now we're going to come out with the thing right now is the Budweiser seltzers, and they're actually making the commercials now, or the play on, well, no, it's not actually beer, and we've got this person's hand hiding the fact that it says Budweiser, but the point is it's Budweiser, you think about it, but it's actually the flavored seltzer water. So big brands do it. There's no fear of feeling the need for brand reinterpretations or reinventions over time. That's just part of the business. If you're going to be around for a long time, you're going to be going through quite a bit of reinvention over time.
Thanks for coming today. And we hope we see you in a couple of weeks' time at the or actually next week, sorry, October 20th for the new Hemp venture.